Revealed, how one millionaire dad's unexpected act of kindness transformed a little girl's life. Peter Thornton stared out from his corner office, his finger tracing the polished wood grain of his desk, the sunlight splintering through his window like the fragments of his life. A self-made millionaire in the quiet rhythms of Medford, he built his empire on dreams and sweat, yet all he could think of was how he'd spent yet another evening buried in spreadsheets while his children lived through milestones without him. His hand clenched involuntarily at the thought of his son's baseball game next week, a game he'd likely miss under the guise of business. The soft whisper of ambition had grown into a cacophony of guilt. For every dollar donated to local charities, there were precious moments lost with his children, his laughter replaced by the sterile hum of success. Would they ever understand the sacrifices he made? Did they even care? With each passing day, he felt more detached from those he desperately wished to impress, caught in a cycle where the wealth he had accumulated slowly drained the joy from his family life. Soon enough, the palpable tension in his chest became too much. That afternoon, he found himself at a local after-school program, volunteering something he convinced himself would re-establish his connection to the community. It was there that he first met Maya, a bright-eyed girl buried under books in the corner. Her ambition to excel in science shone through her anxious demeanor, a flickering light in the shadows of a challenging life. "How do you even?" she stammered, casting her gaze down at the cracked paper. He saw in her eyes the same yearning he remembered from long ago, the desire to break free, to defy the odds. Despite his hesitation, the fear of being seen as a man overstepping boundaries, Peter felt compelled to encourage her. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With each shared conversation, his admiration for Maya grew, yet so did his internal struggle. Encouraging her to pursue a STEM scholarship felt like stepping outside the boundaries of societal expectations. What would his peers say? Their shunning could become a haunting echo, leading him to question if helping a girl from a world so distant from his own was genuinely altruistic or just a way to escape his looming responsibility as a father. As Maya blossomed under his mentorship, the threat of her life shifting dramatically loomed nearby. Her mother fell ill, the tenuous balance they held cracked under the weight of uncertainty. Peter's heart sank. The helplessness in her wide eyes was gut-wrenching. Could he support her dreams while holding on to his own family's fragile facade? The pressure mounted, ripping apart his resolve in tumultuous waves. With the looming crisis pressing in on him, Peter faced a reckoning. He could no longer compartmentalize his worlds. He was just a man lost in the consequences of his choices, in need of redemption not just for Maya, but for himself as well. Standing at the crossroads, Peter's thoughts spiraled into turmoil. He was on the verge of confronting the shadows he'd tried to escape. Would he rise to the challenge and reclaim the fragments of purpose amidst the chaos? The future felt heavy with unfulfilled promise, each breath echoing the gravity of his impending decision, what he truly had to lose, and who he needed to fight for the most. The next morning, Peter woke with a sense of urgency pulsating through him. The previous evening's introspection lingered in the air like a fog, a mix of determination and dread. He had always been a man of calculated moves, navigating corporate landscapes with precision. Yet the stakes had shifted. The emotional terrain he now faced was fraught with uncertainty. Yet he dined alone at the breakfast table, a stark contrast to the chaos of the evenings back when his children joined him. The empty chair opposite him seemed to echo the emptiness he felt in his life. Each spoonful of oatmeal tasted bland, just as his achievements felt devoid of flavor. It was a poignant reminder of the disconnect that had seeped into the fabric of his existence. As he prepared for the day, his gaze fell on the small framed picture of Maya taped to the wall, a smile that radiated hope, a stark juxtaposition to his own burgeoning doubts. The day ahead was vital. An informal gathering of influential business figures would descend upon his luxurious conference room. Declaration of his new philanthropic initiative awaited him there, yet all he could think of was Maya and her struggles. Could he truly step up for her in this moment? Doubts plagued him, his mind racing with the implications of being involved in her life. He questioned whether revealing his support for someone so different would draw ire or admiration from the elite circles he frequented. In that echo of uncertainty, the truth emerged: his wealth could indeed uplift, but in a world yearning for authenticity, it could just as easily backfire. The conference room eventually buzzed with peers wearing polished facades, discussing quarterly profits and market trends. Yet, amid the negotiations and corporate jargon, Peter's mind drifted to the stark contrast of the world he'd seen in the after-school program. The presentations he gave felt hollow now, devoid of the self-sacrifice he recognized was needed. "Peter, how is the new initiative going?" asked James, a fellow board member, prompting a high-stakes discussion about charitable ventures. His voice pulled Peter back into the reality of the gathering. "Any thoughts on how we might reach out to the youth in our community?" Peter's heart raced as the question landed heavily before him. The image of Maya, her ambitions, her circumstances flooded his mind. Could his next move be unveiling a support mechanism for those like her? With every ounce of political acumen he possessed, he weighed the potential reactions and the societal norms dictating his every move, but that moment provided clarity. The dilemma was not whether to act but how to align his professional prowess with his newfound purpose. He realized he could leverage his connections for tangible change, making a case for creating a real impact through education funding, mentorship programs, and opportunities for underprivileged youth. Standing taller, Peter interjected into the conversation. "What if our initiative involved fostering a scholarship program directly aimed at students with aspirations in STEM? We could build a partnership with local schools, reaching out to the very students who have the drive but lack resources." His colleagues paused, surprised by the direction of his proposal. A palpable silence descended, lifting the weight of expectation off his shoulders. Here was a chance to bind two worlds he previously felt at odds, his professional life and his moral awakening as a father. A flicker of curiosity emerged from a few members of the board. A mix of skepticism and intrigue sparking their interest validated his thoughts. This was a conversation worth having. Yet a knot twisted in his stomach. How far could he drive the conversation, and would it jeopardize his status? As the meeting unfolded, Peter's resolve solidified. The fear of being judged for his choices had begun to fade, and with each word exchanged, he discovered a passion ignited through purpose rather than profit. It was invigorating yet frightening. This was his moment to embrace vulnerability and champion a cause bigger than himself. Could this bridge his worlds? As the deliberations continued, he could feel the ground beneath him shifting, a path forming towards his redemption intertwined with Maya's aspirations. And in that instant, the stakes were raised even higher. It was not just about helping one girl, but thousands waiting for a light to guide them through dark times. With decisions pending, pressure mounted around him, and imminent confrontation awaited this newly awakened part of himself. Peter's journey toward real connection had just begun. Could he navigate this uncharted territory and transform not only the lives of those around him but ultimately heal his own fractured existence? There was a tremor of uncertainty coursing through Peter as the meeting wound down. His colleagues' conversations took on a life of their own, bouncing from one initiative to another, yet he felt a weight anchoring him to a singular focus. Fostering a scholarship program was no mere idea, it had become his mission. Each mention of numbers and profits fell flat against the backdrop of his newfound aspirations. After the meeting, he lingered by the large glass window of the conference room. The city skyline gleamed under the afternoon sun, each building a reflection of triumph and ambition. Yet, for Peter, that ambition now felt hollow without real purpose. He traced the skyline with his eyes, searching for direction amid the intimidating array of glass and steel. His thoughts spiraled. Could he realistically make this scholarship program happen? Burgeoning doubts nudged at the edges of his newfound determination. He considered the inevitable pushback from board members resistant to change, those who valued profit margins over altruism. He envisioned James' skeptical eyebrow raised, or the dismissive glance from Rita, who thrived in dissecting financial forecasts rather than societal impacts. Slipping into his office, Peter shut the door, seeking solitude among stacks of reports and memorabilia. He grabbed a legal pad and began to write. At first, the words flowed as adrenaline fueled his pen. He scribbled down details about possible partners within local schools, mentorship frameworks, and targets for funding. However, the momentum slowed, and each point turned into an echo of uncertainty as the sense of magnitude crashed over him. Was he really prepared to change the dynamics of a corporation intoxicated by profit? A distraction pulled his eyes toward the framed photograph of Maya that he had set on his desk. Her laughter seemed to break through the walls around his ambition, reminding him why he was doing this. He could almost hear her narrate her dreams of becoming an engineer, the light in her eyes shining with potential. In that moment, what felt daunting transformed into a personal commitment. He took a deep breath, and a new plan formed. Peter needed allies, people who shared his vision for change. It was time to reach out, not just to board members, but to community leaders who understood the challenges facing youth like Maya. He began drafting emails to local nonprofit directors and educational reform advocates. Yet, as he hit send, the fear cropped up once more. What if they rejected his proposal? What if they deemed him insincere or naive? The more he questioned, the clearer the answer became. It didn't matter. He was no longer pursuing this for the approval of his peers, he was doing this to foster connection and personal growth, not just for himself but for Maya and the countless others like her. Determination surged anew as he committed to this path, but a lingering worry remained. Each email was a commitment to transparency, and it risked exposing his vulnerability, a privileged businessman now seeking to redefine his purpose. As the evening sky turned to twilight, Peter felt the immensity of what lay ahead. He would face resistance, but for the first time, the prospect of real progress ignited a fire within him. It was about more than just asking for support, it was about redefining his legacy. However, deep in the recesses of his mind, he questioned how far he was willing to push back against established norms. And would his newfound passion be enough to withstand the inevitable resistance from his own circles? The personal stakes were rising. The time had come to confront his own fears and the fragile alliances that would either fortify his cause or unravel it completely. As he gazed at the city lights flickering to life, a singular thought emerged: what if the greatest test lay not in building bridges with the community but in dismantling the walls he had constructed around himself? Peter woke the next morning with a sense of clarity that cut through the chaos of doubts. The relentless din of the previous day's uncertainties had quieted, morphing into a resolute whisper of purpose. Today, he would take tangible steps. He had spent too long behind the walls he erected, operating on autopilot, shielded from the vulnerability of true connection. He sat at his desk, focusing on the emails he had sent the night before. The responses began trickling in, each one a blend of encouragement and skepticism. Some acknowledged the feasibility of his vision, others outright questioned its relevance. Peter read each message meticulously, allowing the words to wash over him, noting the nuances of each reply. With every skepticism he faced, his resolve solidified. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began outlining his next steps. It was time to confront his own colleagues. To address their growing concerns about his proposed scholarship program, he knew he needed to be strategic. He decided to arrange informal meetings, casual enough to foster genuine discussions yet structured to convey his seriousness. Peter moved swiftly through the day, typing up proposals and scheduling meetings with board members. He specifically sought out those who might be open to his vision. He meticulously prepared talking points that highlighted both community impact and potential profit for the company. It was crucial to frame the scholarship program as an investment, one that could yield dazzling returns in reputation and employee satisfaction. As he stepped out for a coffee break, his heart raced. He spotted James in the corner, deep in conversation with a couple of directors. They laughed, surrounded by the clinking of coffee cups and the hustle of morning workflow. Peter hesitated for a heartbeat. James had been his mentor, yet he always leaned towards the corporate side of ethics, often dismissing initiatives that lacked immediate financial justification. Overcoming the rush of insecurity, he approached them. "Hey, James, got a moment?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The pleasant atmosphere between them evaporated, replaced by curiosity and uncertainty. "What's up, Peter?" James replied, eyebrow cocked, a clear signal that he anticipated a pitch. "I'm planning a meeting to discuss the scholarship program. I think there's real merit to it, both for our community and for us as a corporation." Peter's tone was assertive, but internally he battled with anxiety. James squinted slightly, considering the implications. "You know how the board reacts to programs like that, right? They want to see numbers, not just ideals." "I understand," Peter countered quickly, sensing the challenge rising. "But what if we frame it in a way that's beneficial? Just think about the potential for increasing employee engagement and attracting new talent." The conversation shifted as Peter articulated the vision behind the program, meticulously detailing possible partnerships with local schools and how it aligned with corporate social responsibility. He was acutely aware of the stakes. This was a testing ground for both his professional influence and his personal conviction. Encouraged by his own passion, Peter pressed further, referencing real-life stories, including Maya's, as a motivational tool. He could see James soften slightly, re-evaluation reflected in his posture. As they wrapped up, James promised to consider Peter's ideas. However, part of Peter felt unsettled. The specter of established norms and ingrained skepticism loomed, and while he made strides, he was still just one voice among many. Back at his desk, he felt the burden of reinvention. With every action he took, the walls of resistance he faced only seemed to grow higher. He considered what it would take to dismantle those walls instead. How far was he willing to go? What sacrifices would he need to make to achieve his vision? The questions hung heavy in the air, marking the threshold of his journey. He realized that the biggest challenge ahead would not only be convincing others but confronting the limitations he placed upon himself. As night descended, he found himself gazing out at the skyline once more. Each luminescent window appeared like a flicker of potential, bidding him to step forward. This wasn't just about change in the external landscape, it was about transformation from within. And so, he resolved that the next day would not just be about meetings or proposals but about engaging deeper in his own transformation. What hidden capabilities remained dormant within him, waiting for a catalyst? He noted that self-discovery was now not merely an aspiration but a necessity. With a newfound sense of urgency, he understood that the real work lay ahead, poised on the edge of anxious anticipation. Would he embrace the opportunity for profound change, both for himself and the community he sought to serve? The future loomed ahead, hazy yet enticing, as he readied himself for the unfolding challenges. The morning light streamed into Peter's apartment, casting a warm glow that felt almost deceptive in its tranquility. He sat up in bed, deliberating over the steps he needed to take. Today wasn't the day for surface-level connections, today required deeper engagement. He needed to confront not only his colleagues but the very nature of his ambition. Did he truly believe in the scholarship program as a transformative initiative, or was it a defensive measure to shield himself from further disillusionment? Shaking off the remnants of uncertainty, he dressed with purpose. Each article of clothing adorned his body like armor, no longer a barrier, but a statement of intent. The air around him was laced with a mixture of electric anticipation and underlying dread. As he descended the stairs that led to his office, he pondered the potential outcomes of his discussions: acceptance, rejection, or perhaps indifference. Yet, among these possibilities, a new thought emerged. What if he approached the meetings not just as a promoter of the program but as an advocate for creativity and change within the organization? In the office, he began his day with the first meeting. The group comprised mid-level managers who had shown interest in workplace innovations. As they settled in, Peter introduced the discussion by tossing aside the formal agenda. "I want to hear your thoughts on how we connect our business goals with community impact," he said, prompting a wave of surprised looks. This hadn't been the customary structure they were used to. He listened intently as ideas flowed, taking careful notes. Phrases like employee morale and client engagement emerged, echoing the very themes he wanted to intertwine with his scholarship concept. Each suggestion felt like a piece of the puzzle he had been trying to assemble, a tangible means to an end that could help redefine the company's ethos. As the meeting shifted, Peter invoked his vision of the scholarship program along with the feedback from his peers. He was surprised to find that, rather than the anticipated skepticism, there was an openness for dialogue. He urged them to imagine the employers they could become, and in doing so, he found himself connecting with them on a deeper level. They were no longer faceless colleagues, they were allies in a shared vision, passionate about making their workplace a better version of itself. By midday, Peter felt a renewed sense of vigor. But as he returned to his desk, a wave of doubt crashed over him. Was he leading this initiative out of altruism or a desire for validation? The line between the two blurred every time he considered his own desire for recognition and the overarching goal of genuine societal change. In the afternoon, he found himself in a one-on-one with Sarah, a director known for her analytical prowess but also for her blunt nature. He knew this conversation could be pivotal. As they sat across from each other, Peter laid out his proposals with confidence, but he remained vulnerable, ready for her direct questions. "Why should we invest our resources in this?" she asked, her tone cutting but her interest piqued. "Because it's not just about charity, it's about creating a circle of support that benefits everyone involved," Peter replied, his voice steady. "Imagine what we could achieve if we cultivated talent from the ground up. It breaks the cycle of disconnection and opens our firm to potential that's been previously overlooked." As they delved deeper into the discussion, Sarah appeared to soften, and Peter caught a glimpse of a possibility. Could he inspire not just cooperation, but genuine belief in his plan? He finished the meeting feeling empowered. He had forged nuances of persuasion, swaddled in sincerity, and managed to push past a significant barrier. But even as victories were celebrated, an unsettling thought lingered. What would happen if he failed to get the board's buy-in? How would he stitch up the frayed edges of a project so intrinsically tied to his self-worth? He sat at his desk, staring blankly at the proposal document. The stakes were higher than he had anticipated, and the burden of potential failure weighed heavily on him. The day wound down, and as he left the office, Peter felt transformed from the man he had been just a week ago. However, the deeper he delved into his personal evolution, the more he recognized shadows of old fears resurfacing. Would he allow those fears to dictate his journey, or could he reclaim the narrative? Embracing both his ambitions and his vulnerabilities, he stepped outside into the cool evening air, the sky overhead a tapestry of darkness pierced by stars. In that moment, he realized the true journey only just began. Would he be able to sustain this momentum, or would he stumble under the weight of his convictions? As doubt coiled around his purpose, the future loomed ahead while the internal conflict intensified. The uncertainty only propelled him forward. The fight for authenticity seemed more pressing than ever, beckoning him to face the ultimate test. What awaited him on this path of growth and challenge? The morning was punctuated by the reassuring rhythm of Peter's footsteps echoing across the polished office floor. A sense of purpose wrapped around him like a familiar blanket, but underneath it lay a simmering tension. He had successfully navigated the earlier meetings, yet that initial spark of engagement seemed to mask a deeper unease. How permanent would these changes prove? The question nagged at him like an unresolved chord that demanded resolution. As he settled into his workspace, Peter pulled the scholarship proposal before him, each word a reminder of the stakes. It was no longer just a networking tool, it was a reflection of his identity and a test of his resolve. He sensed the energy in the office had shifted, colleagues now viewing him through a new lens, one tinted with curiosity and anticipation. This realization thrilled him yet left him bare before their scrutiny. The morning felt alive, buzzing with potential. He made his way to a casual lunch with a few colleagues. What began as small talk quickly morphed into discussions about the project's implications for their own departments. Peter listened carefully, tapping into their hopes, frustrations, and aspirations. Each comment solidified the idea that he wasn't merely a lone voice advocating for a new initiative, he was a catalyst, a transformative force igniting collective momentum. However, in the midst of this burgeoning alliance, doubts flickered within him like a disrupted film reel. Could he carry this enthusiasm beyond lunchtime chatter? His mind wandered to the looming board meeting. The potential for rejection loomed large, like a shadow cast upon his budding confidence. A chilling thought crept in. What if he had oversold the program, misjudged its appeal among those with power to influence its fate? After lunch, he found himself lost in superficial tasks, trying to ward off the encroaching dread. As he scrolled through emails, a profound realization struck him. He recognized how he had shielded himself from vulnerability for so long, retreating into calculated presentations, smooth pitches, and well-structured meetings. Yet, those tactics had only led to a cycle of stagnation. Today had shown him that authenticity and transparency were essential in rallying not only support but genuine belief. Pushing aside the evasive minutiae, Peter gathered his thoughts. He needed to manifest this newfound clarity during the board meeting. Reimagining his approach, he drafted a presentation underscored by emotions and personal anecdotes, real stories that highlighted the power of transformation, not just policy and procedure. He envisioned himself standing before the board, unflinchingly sharing his vision, but more importantly, sharing the truth of why it mattered. That evening, after a long day of reflection and revision, he stepped into the quiet of his apartment. A pang of trepidation filled him. What if the board's response rejected not only his initiative, but him? As he paced the room, he realized that the fear of rejection had always felt more daunting than the potential and dignity of success. The night wore on, each tick of the clock amplifying his apprehension. Peter sat on his couch, poring over his notes for the umpteenth time, aiming to solidify the narrative he intended to weave before the board. He had come to a profound understanding: failure could be a crushing blow, yet authenticity, true vulnerability, would be the bedrock of his performance. A spark ignited within him. To lead effectively was not to hide, but to face those fears head-on and reinterpret them as stepping stones. As he finally closed his notes and turned out the lights, he marveled at the transformation brewing in him. Tomorrow would not just be a presentation, it would be a reckoning. The journey he'd begun was one that demanded not just belief in a program, but in himself, a journey interwoven with the very essence of who he wanted to be. Yet, as he lay down to sleep, uncertainty still loomed. What would his peers see in that meeting? The man they had come to know, or the self who feared rejection? Could he emerge as a figure of inspiration or falter under the weight of expectation? As his eyelids grew heavy, the question loomed larger: would he face the board with the North Star of authenticity guiding him, or would he consolidate his fears into a suffocating silence? Tomorrow's revelation awaited. The morning light poured into Peter's office, casting long shadows as he arrived with a sense of urgency. Today was not just any day, it was pivotal, a moment teetering on the edge of possibility and despair. Every step toward the conference room felt as though he was marching toward a grand reveal, yet beneath the surface, his stomach churned with anticipation and fear. He could almost hear the relentless ticking of the clock urging him forward. As he set up his presentation, he reminded himself of the stories he had woven together, a tapestry of experiences reflecting personal commitment and shared values. Each slide was not just a bullet point, they were windows into the world he envisioned, where education could transcend barriers, where lives could be transformed by opportunity. But with every click through the slides, doubt gnawed at him. Could he genuinely convey to the board the essence of his vision? The fear of stumbling over words echoed in his mind. When the board members finally filed in, he adjusted his tie, a small act of defiance against his feelings of inadequacy. The straightforward expressions on their faces made a knot tighten in his chest. They sat, expectant yet inscrutable, waiting for him to take charge. Gulping down his anxiety, Peter squared his shoulders, recalling his intention to lead with authenticity instead of defensiveness. He began. His voice was steady but laced with passionate urgency as he presented the scholarship proposal. Each anecdote flowed like a stream, drawing them into the lives he sought to impact. He felt a connection building. He was painting a picture, crafting a vision not merely in words but through shared humanity. Once he spoke of a girl named Mia, a bright student with limited means whose potential was stifled by circumstances. He felt a shift in the room, a collective breath as his peers engaged with his narrative. Noticing their reactions, Peter harnessed that energy, weaving in more personal tales of struggle and triumph. He realized he wasn't just advocating for a program, he was sharing a part of himself, layers of vulnerability that laid the foundation of true leadership. In that moment, he understood that rejection didn't diminish his worth. It was an outgrowth of necessary risk-taking and self-discovery. Yet, as he neared the conclusion, a shadow flickered across the faces of board members. The tension morphed into skepticism. What if they saw through his earnest efforts? What if his appeal to passion didn't resonate? Anxiety threatened to undermine his resolve. Lurking beneath the bravado was the fear that they would cast aside his earnest appeal as naive idealism. But he reined it in, focusing instead on why this initiative mattered, not for him, but for those who would benefit. Taking a deep breath, he shifted his approach, addressing their concerns head-on. He articulated the feasibility of his vision, backing it with data, reinforcing how this was not merely an emotional plea but a calculated step towards positive outcomes. As the minutes ticked by, and board members listened intently, doubts began to fade, replaced with the sparks of curiosity and even potential agreement. When the meeting finally wrapped up, he felt the weight lift. The responses he received ranged from thoughtful questions to nods of approval. Each interaction ignited a flicker of hope, suggesting they were beginning to see not just a program, but his invested belief in its significance. He had transcended his earlier hesitations and stepped into the space of a potential leader, unearthing hidden qualities he hadn't known existed. However, the final moments left him with a lingering unease. The true agenda of the board rarely came to light until the final decision. Would they see him as a visionary or dismiss him as an idealist grasping at straws? His heart raced, still navigating the fallout of vulnerability mingling with aspiration. As he exited the room, the afterglow of hope was quickly eclipsed by apprehension. His thoughts spiraled. What would their ultimate judgment be? He began to wonder if this was merely the beginning of a transformative journey for not just an entire cohort of students but for himself. What role would he embrace moving forward? The path toward leadership was becoming clearer, but uncertainty still lingered. Yet, amidst it all, one question pierced through the haze: would he have the courage to articulate a more expansive vision, even if it risked even deeper exposure? The next stage of his personal evolution was just beginning, and he prepared to step into that unknown with both determination and trepidation. Peter couldn't shake the weight of uncertainty as he wandered through the halls of the building. The board had listened, and for a fleeting moment, he had felt a surge of confidence, but now, with every step away from that room, self-doubt crept back into his mind. He replayed the meeting over and over, each phrase, every nod, and the skeptical furrows of their brows. Questions clawed at him relentlessly. Had he done enough? Did he convey his vision clearly? More critically, would they trust him to carry it forward? He soon found refuge in the quiet of his office, closing the door to block out the bustling activity beyond. Surrounded by stark walls adorned with framed accolades of his past achievements, Peter sought clarity. He took a seat at his desk, inhaling deeply while forcing himself to focus on what he could control, his next steps. Perhaps, he mused, it was time to recalibrate his approach. Instead of solely chasing approval from the board, he could draw strength from his initial inspiration, the lives he aimed to change. Flipping through his notes, he came upon Mia's story again. The brightness in her eyes as she spoke about her aspirations rang clear in his mind. It softened the edges of his anxiety. He realized that her dreams, entangled in his own vision for the proposal, were significant beyond the graphs and statistics. The scholarships represented much more than funding; they were aspirations materialized, promise turned tangible. With renewed clarity, he decided it was essential for him to reconnect with that heartfelt vision, to ground himself in a place where passion eclipsed doubt. Determined, he reached for his laptop and began drafting emails to relevant stakeholders, community leaders, parents, and even students. He wanted to gather their stories, inspire dialogue, and create a tapestry of voices that complemented his own presentation of the proposal. Perhaps if he wrapped their narratives around his, it would paint a more compelling picture for the board in the next round of discussions. As he typed, something shifted within him. The realization that he was not alone in this mission washed over him. He wasn't just an individual seeking approval, he was part of a larger narrative that reflected hope, resilience, and the undeniable need for change. It was exhilarating, almost as though a flame of purpose had been rekindled within it. Hours drifted by, and the once blank screen bloomed with ideas, outlines, and early drafts that felt far more personal. Peter felt like he was in a mental dance, creating momentum and exploring his own intelligence in describing the impact of their collective potential. With each word, he peeled back layers of insecurity, revealing not just his role in the initiative but the strength of community support powering it forward. But as the evening drew near, a familiar unease swirled once more. Deep inside, he could feel the stakes climbing. Every action he took transformed into a rippling effect, affecting more than just his job. This was about lives, real, vibrant lives, depending on whether he could craft a vision compelling enough to convert intention into reality. Anxiety resurfaced, rearing its head as he envisioned presenting again, this time with more voices echoing behind him. Would that be enough to bridge the gap of skepticism? He took a moment to breathe, then forced the anxiety aside, reminding himself of the journey so far. Each step carried value, and now, with a greater purpose in mind, he had to embrace the chance to be brave. It was time to confront the potential fallout of this endeavor. Whether success or failure, both would reveal parts of himself he had yet to explore. With resolve settling in his bones, Peter conceptualized his next move. He would not only refine the proposal, he would turn it into a unified voice, a clarion call for compassion and change. Amid this fog of uncertainty lingered another question, sharper than the rest. If he was to fully transform, how could he prepare to handle rejection if it came, and what if his vulnerability opened doors he hadn't even imagined? With a pulse of anticipation fueling his thoughts, he decided it was time to take the next step toward clarity, meeting directly with board members outside the corporate confines. He would be the architect of his development, and it was time to build bridges without fear. Still, a disquieting thought crossed his mind. Would he find the right balance between vulnerability and leadership? or would the journey expose serious cracks in his ambition? Peter stood with purpose as he approached the conference room, the polished surface of the table reflecting his resolve and uncertainty. He was ready to return to the board, but this time, he had armed himself with a clearer vision, one that resonated with the stories that tugged at his heart rather than mere business metrics. He could feel a shift within himself. Each step he took felt fuller, infused with the weight of responsibility and the promise of change. In the boardroom, the atmosphere felt charged. The members were engaged in conversation, yet their focus narrowed as he entered. Peter cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the hush of anticipation. Rather than reciting rehashed statistics from his notes, he chose to open with Mia's story. He found strength in her dreams and used her narrative as a lens through which he could filter down his vision. Her eyes lit up. Peter began, when she spoke about wanting to build bridges in her community, to cultivate hope where there seems to be none. As he shared her aspiration, Peter's voice found an energy he didn't know he possessed. The board members leaned in, curiosity sparking in their eyes. With every phrase, he believed more passionately in the cause, transforming statistics into a living portrait of potential. What surprised him most was not simply the reaction of the board, but what emerged from within himself, a newfound perspective on leadership itself. He realized that effective leadership was not just about guiding others, it was about allowing his vulnerabilities to connect deeply with the people he aimed to serve. He had often feared that showing his true self would weaken his position. Instead, it strengthened his argument and forged a bond with those listening. Midway through his presentation, he noticed a flicker of skepticism on one board member's face, a woman known for her critical insights. Instead of retreating, he leaned into it. "I understand the reservations we might face when questioning the effectiveness of expanding our scholarships," he acknowledged, allowing a pause for emphasis. "But I need you to see this not just as a project, but as a lifeline. I stand not solely as a proposer, but as a vessel for the voices of those whose dreams hang in the balance." He could see the wheels turning in the minds of the board as he wove the tapestry of stories into a compelling narrative. The more he shared about the families, the children, and their unyielding hope, the more he felt the shift. It was subtle but palpable. Each nod from the board members echoed back his commitment, affirming his place as a leader who was prepared not just to lead, but to inspire. Yet, as he concluded his session, a familiar shadow washed over him. The sense of doubt that loomed like a specter brought forth an urgent question: what if they still didn't accept his proposal? What if, despite his vulnerability, his story-driven approach fell flat? In that moment, he realized he had to confront his fear of rejection, to accept that it was a necessary part of his growth. The unease of that possibility stirred his core, but as he walked out of the boardroom, he recognized a crucial truth: he had taken the leap. But with this leap came the daunting possibility of falling short of his intentions. He needed to prepare for whatever was next, even if it meant facing harsh truths or challenges he was not ready for. As Peter walked back to his office, the atmosphere was charged with the potential of what lay ahead. He felt alive with both trepidation and determination, ready to seize whatever would come his way. Would he find a way to embrace failure as a catalyst for deeper growth, or would he buckle beneath the weight of expectation? And in that moment of contemplation, he felt a spark of resilience ignite. Perhaps, he pondered, this was merely the beginning of a far more significant journey into uncharted personal territory. The question lingered: was he ready to wield the discomfort of rejection to fuel his transformation, or would he shy away from it yet again? Peter stood at his office window, the skyline of Medford glistening under the sun, a clear reflection of his ambitions and the new life he was ready to embrace. The scholarship proposal had been officially approved, a culmination of weeks filled with anxiety and excitement. But the approval was more than just a professional milestone. It represented the first step toward redefining his legacy and cementing his relationship with his children and the community. As the news echoed through the corridors of the corporate building, Peter felt an exhilarating rush. He had navigated the complexities of corporate resistance, armed with vulnerability and a hunger for meaningful change. The board had not only accepted the scholarship program but had entrusted him with the responsibility of its implementation. This was validation not just of his ideas, but of his transformation from a profit-driven businessman into a purpose-driven leader. Each day since that defining board meeting brought new challenges and triumphs. Peter immersed himself in the process, reaching out to schools, forming partnerships, and engaging community leaders, expanding his network in ways he never thought possible. He met with countless students like Maya, listening to their dreams and aspirations, reminding him of the spark that had ignited his desire to act. He could see their potential mirrored in the gleam of their eyes, a reflection of the joy he sought to cultivate in his own family. Still, what resonated most was the transition within him. No longer was he the detached businessman wrapped in the cocoon of his success, he had transformed into a father intent on making up for lost time. If anything, the experience illuminated the fact that success without connection had left him hollow. As he returned home each evening, he shared stories of Maya and her peers with his children, inviting them into this new chapter of his life, a softer, more engaged version of himself. One particularly resonant experience was when he invited Maya to a presentation he was giving to a group of business leaders and potential investors. Standing beside him, she shared her aspirations. It was an unprecedented act of bravery for him, openly showcasing the face of the very person he sought to uplift. His colleagues were visibly moved, and the room was infused with a sense of purpose that he'd never captured before in those sterile quarterly meetings. Maya's tangible impact on his life became a turning point for his family as well. He noticed the shift in his son's interest, inspired by the scholarship stories he offered at dinner. The little girl he once mentored breathed life into his relationships, and for the first time, Peter felt the threads of family reconnecting. Peter's heart swelled with pride when, a few months later, he found himself awarded a local philanthropy honor for his contributions to the community. This recognition wasn't just a badge of honor, it underscored his growth journey and how igniting one small spark had ignited a chain reaction. He succeeded in merging his personal pursuits with his professional accomplishments and was now set to reaffirm and strengthen that legacy. Standing on stage, he glanced out at the audience gathered for the event, his family among them. As he spoke about the importance of fostering talent instead of insulating one's success, he witnessed the ripple effects of his decision, a chance to reclaim his life while offering hope to others. Realizing how far he had come, he marveled at how beautifully the pieces had fit together. The change catalyzed through the courage to act not only impacted local students but revitalized the dynamic with his own children. It was liberating to understand that the true essence of leadership was rooted in authenticity. He had come full circle, no longer shackled by perceptions of success. He had achieved personal fulfillment through real connection, both with the community and with his own family. As he finished his speech, Peter felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had stepped into his identity, facing fears, embracing vulnerability, and discovering the true power of purpose. This was not merely the end for Peter Thornton, it was the dawn of his new chapter, a life brimming with connections, a legacy forged in compassion, and a promise renewed to his family. He had transcended the emptiness of past pursuits, genuinely achieving harmony within himself. Now it's your turn. Don't wait even one more second to share this journey with your friends. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure uplifting narratives keep rolling out. Comment below your reactions and theories about this transformative ending. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.